everybody. This week we're going to do a more integrative and comprehensive assessment and investigation into Centrus. If you are just merely looking for a bull case to confirm your desire to purchase the stock, then this video probably is not for you because it might add more questions than it provides answers. But in that, it will also provide you with more information. If you want to cookie cutter, copy and paste promotion of why you should buy Centrus, then I would just recommend watching other videos, because this is not going to be that video. There's going to be concerns discussed in this, and as anybody who has been watching this channel knows, I'm invested in Centrus, but that doesn't mean that I should be ignorant to the potential risks of owning it, and that maybe I should actually have a basic understanding of what they actually do, instead of the multitude of misnomers, misunderstandings that I see in the comment sections and within articles themselves. So let's get into this. Before we get into this, this is the weekly update. I got out of BTU and I got out of SILJ, Silver Miner Junior ETF, and I purchased more Transocean and I switched out the silver with KGC. And the reason I got out of Peabody is because, as I noted on one of my first segments of the year, that I bought it because it was the only thing on my screen that kind of hit a buy point, and I wanted some sort of activity to get the month started off with, so I bought that. We don't marry positions, and it really hasn't had a good performance. It hasn't had a bad performance either for the year, but and this isn't to say that it won't go up. I think that there's better opportunities, and most importantly, that I have more conviction on. And you could define conviction as is, if it falls another 20 or 30%, would you buy more? And as we've seen, Transocean at one point got 20% down from its high after running, 70% for the year, and then it's backed off to up 40%, and now I think it's up around 50% for the year. So the answer is yes, because I bought more of it. And I can't say I would have done that with Peabody, which means maybe I shouldn't be in the trade, and especially since my primary reasoning for being in the position to begin with was that there was nothing else going on, i.e. lack of optionality, i.e. I was necessitous, and one could say desperate, and therefore I made an unforced error. And I don't think it was an unforced error. I actually believed in it, and I was hoping for more out of the coal sector for earnings this quarter than what actually manifested, and some of the names aren't looking good at all. BTU is actually holding up quite well. Now I'm sure it'll take care of its surety agreements and hopefully return some cash to the holders. But anyway, onto the meat of this piece. What does Centrus do? I'm going to say what they do, and then we're going to say what they don't do. And this is a copy and paste off their website. Links in the description. Centrus Energy is the world's most diversified supplier of enriched uranium fuel. Drawing upon our long-term supply agreements with primary producers, purchases from secondary sources, and inventory, Centrus is continuing its nearly 60-year record of providing utility customers with assured, affordable, and on-time deliveries. Centrus has structured a portfolio of strategic relationships to meet our customers' requirements for more responsive fuel procurement. In addition, as the market has grown more complex and uncertain, Centrus is working to ensure secondary sources are efficiently placed in the market and that its customers have competitive supply sources. Okay. They also, so that's their LEU segment. Low enriched uranium. That's the acronym. We're going to call that LEU for now on. Then they have a second segment, which is services. We'll sum it up as fuel production and chemistry, including HALEU, high assay, low enriched uranium. HALEU is what we're calling that. Transportation and packaging, operations, licensing, regulatory support. If you're trying to license your plant, they can help you. Need help with operations? They can help you. regulatory support to jump through some hurdles, they can help you. Nuclear criticality safety analysis, they can help you. Component design and engineering, manufacturability analysis, design for manufacturability, advanced manufacturing. Okay, so what do? They're a middleman. They're the plug, they're the dealer, they're the connection. They know people and they know how to get what it is that you want if you pay them a premium. Okay, that's the LEU segment. They don't make, we're going to get into that next. They don't make the LEU. They buy the LEU, they have the LEU, they sell you the LEU. And the second segment is a tech service design and manufacturing business, a trafficker of sorts, a commodity trading company if you wish to paint with a broad brush. They help connect an end user with a producer, helping reduce the complexity of managing a supply chain down to a phone call. People pay the premium to outsource the headache. Centrus is in the business of procuring and securing product. They're a service, supply, and technology business. The reason that this matters, for one of many reasons, is because it means that they should be that they shouldn't be a capital intensive business, and that they should, as a service company, have, well, pretty decent margins. So what aren't they, and what don't they do? They do not own the AC100M centrifuge, because most of the news in the media about Centrus is how they're running this HALEU, or up-and-coming HALEU producing centrifuge. But they don't own it. Okay, they procure LEU to redistribute. They don't own an enrichment facility. They don't. And if you don't believe that, then look at the balance sheet, and then look at the PP&E. And just go to the balance sheet, look at their assets, go to the cash flow statement, and then see the PP&E, property, plant, and equipment. And it's a paltry few million. And there is no sale leaseback of the Piketon, Ohio facility. They don't own it. And the reason I'm stressing this so much and trying to put it different ways is because a lot of people think that it's theirs. The HALEU, by the way, that also comes from that centrifuge one day, is not Centrus's either. The department will own the HALEU produced from the demonstration cascade, and Centrus will be compensated on a cost plus incentive fee basis. That incentive fee is structured based upon the services that they're providing. They are a service company, which doesn't sound as sexy as a uranium company. And by the way, no, they also don't mine uranium. Now, if there's anything in the descriptions that you want to read, I recommend reading this because I find it absolutely fascinating, and it's really well worth a read, and I'm only going to touch upon it briefly here. On August 1st, 2022, Canada granted CISN Shipping Group, the parent company of Atlantic Project 2 owner Atlantic Ro-Ro Carriers, a one-year exemption from sanctions imposed on July 7th in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The sanctions prohibit any Canadian person or entity from providing any service to any Russian entity or person, including water transportation and chemical manufacturing and chemical products. Let me pause here for a moment. The reason this matters isn't to bore you. The reason this matters is because they don't produce LEU. They get LEU from Russia. And this is all relevant because there's not a teleportation machine that makes it happen. There's logistical daisy chains that occur that need to happen in order for them to get the LEU, which drives the primarily most of their revenue. Most of their revenue comes from the segment of selling LEU to utilities. So that's why this matters, in case you're wondering. And I'm not just trying to tell you fun things, even though they might be fun, but they're actually relevant and pertinent. I continue. A decision to let the exemption expire on August 1st of this year would have detrimental effects on Tenex, which supplies Russian EUP, that's enriched uranium product, to multiple U.S. utilities. Now the Rosatom subsidiary may have to scramble to secure a carrier willing to move Class 7 material that isn't flagged Canadian or Russian. In May last year, Washington imposed sanctions on 7 Russian shipping companies and a few dozen vessels, and globally fewer and fewer carriers are willing to move Class 7 material, and those that do are having a harder time ensuring it. That means Tenex may have to charter a specialized vessel, which could be a lot more costly. A cost, by the way, that I'm sure will cut into the profits of Centrus, for instance. Or some sort of a indemnification and force majeure that the government might subsidize, which to aid Centrus, let's say. I continue. Another more controversial option is the potential for China to supply EUP, enriched uranium product, to the U.S. Energy Intelligence understands that one U.S. utility signed a deal for Chinese EUP in the fourth quarter of 2022. Theoretically, this could be scaled up, with China purchasing Russian EUP for its own use and then selling Chinese origin EUP into the U.S. Sources question how economically viable that would be for China, and one U.S. buyer scoffed, suggesting that such an activity, if scaled up, would likely be squashed by the U.S. State Department, which has taken a protectionist approach to nuclear trade with Russia and China. Chinese EUP imports still face Trump-era tariffs, just as Washington limits Russian EUP imports via the 2020 amendment to the Russian Suspension Agreement, and with the restraint of the import limits of the RSA, which dropped to 15% of U.S. demand by the end of this decade, Russia's Tenex is sold out until 2028. For U.S.-based Centrus, which has contracts to resell Russian EUP in the U.S., their primary source of revenue, any interruption to the Russian supply risks harming its bottom line. No matter what happens with the Canadian sanctions exemption for CISN Atlantic Ro-Ro, Canadian producer Cameco is clearly restricted from shipping anything via St. Petersburg. Cameco will likely continue to work with Kazatomprom to increase the efficiency of a trans-Caspian trade route that avoids crossing Russia. While this may make shipping Kazakh uranium practicable, it does nothing to solve Texan's problem. So let me sum this up with less words, but still probably too many for a short attention time span generation, which I'm part of. So let's get this straight. Centrus Energy owns a subsidiary called American Centrifuge Operation LLC. Those are the ones doing the centrifuge HALEU project. Then another segment of theirs is providing LEU to commercial utilities and nuclear power reactors. To do this, they buy LEU from Rosatom. This enriched uranium is provided by Tenex, which is an overseas trading company and is a subsidiary of Rosatom. Centrus gets their EUP, enriched uranium product, in part from a Canadian domiciled company named CISN Shipping Group and their subsidiary Atlantic Ro-Ro Carriers. Due to some sanctions expiring and others possibly coming, this logistical nightmare is just that, a nightmare. As always, you can trust people to do what they do, and what they do best. Find workarounds that undermine the spirit of what they say. Oftentimes that comes in the form of a rhetorical smokescreen. ESG anybody? Such as mental accounting and compartmentalization. China buying uranium from Russia and then selling American non-Russian uranium because it's in China, and then calling it Chinese uranium, which has no net difference in impact to Russia, but does make people feel better. And since most people operate under the pretext of feels over reals, then that's actually a solution. Instead of picking up uranium from the St. Petersburg port, we'll emit more carbon emissions, packing it through Kazakhstan, and ship it out through the Caspian Sea. And if you don't believe, and if you want to say that that's kind of a conspiratorial narrative, and that you don't believe that such dubious behavior will happen, then you must be unfamiliar with Latvian blend oil, which we'll get to in a moment. But before I do that, be reminded of this the next time someone says that you shouldn't mix politics with investing, as though geopolitics doesn't play a crucial role in the daisy chain of events. You should always care about what dogmatic zealots and ideologues will impact your investments, whether you're the zealot or someone else is. And that's really worth thinking about. The back door that keeps Russian oil flowing into Europe. This is the Latvian oil. In the oil market, traders whisper about a Latvian blend, a new origin for diesel that looks like a workaround to supply Russian product mixed with something else. The typical trade goes from Primorsk, a Russian oil export town near St. Petersburg, into Ventspils, a port in Latvia that has a large oil terminal and tanking capacity. That's where the blending takes place. There are many other locations where blending is happening, including in the Netherlands and on the high seas, in what traders call ship-to-ship transfers. For many in the market, the Latvian blend is simply shorthand for any blend that contains Russian molecules, regardless of where the mixing took place. And by the way, this isn't some third-rank, third-tier oil company doing this. This is Shell we're talking about right now, in part. It continues to say, the Latvian blend is a reminder of similar back doors to trade in sanctioned Iranian and Venezuelan crude, which for years had been offered in the Far East as Malaysian blend or Singapore blend. For Shell, the strategy is not risk-free. The company was forced to issue a rare apology last month after its traders bought a single cargo of deeply discounted Russian Urals crude, triggering an outcry, including the Ukrainian Foreign Affairs Minister accusing the company of profiting from Ukrainian blood. As though they don't get their nuclear from Russia or something. Now, there's a bigger idea at play here. And it's important because if you're going to have a chance of being a successful investor, you need to have the metacognition and self-realization to understand abstract ideas. And one of the abstract ideas governing much of what we're talking about here is the propensity for humans to gerrymander the hell out of things to justify whatever it is that they're trying to do. Not just to make a buck, but anything. It doesn't matter. You see this sort of constrained data set when people are talking about full life cycle analysis versus endpoint analysis, whether that be an EV to a traditional vehicle or meets carbon emission versus plant carbon emissions. If you start measuring at this point and then stop measuring at this point, then you can form fit the data by cherry picking it to get the results you want. It's now Chinese nuclear, or it's now Latvian oil, or EVs produce less carbon emissions than traditional vehicles insofar as you constrain the data set and don't keep constant your comparisons and control for the variables, like, for instance, doing a endpoint analysis on an EV, i.e. when it's driving down the road, how much carbon does it emit, versus doing a full life cycle analysis of oil changes and fueling and replacement of parts more frequently and the mined material and so on and so forth of traditional vehicles, and then saying, see, told you EVs are less carbon polluting, as though the lithium necessary to make the EV half-ton battery wasn't mined using heavy-duty diesel equipment and then shipped over to a smelter in China on a diesel ship and then emitted all to hell in all kinds of nasty smog and emissions in a smelter to then get put back on a diesel ship and then shipped to some manufacturing plant to create the battery. You see what I'm getting at? And then it doesn't stop there. I thought that was just kind of fun. Maybe you should know as a consumer of food that's completely off the primary topic but is tangentially associated to this meta theme. And I know I'm getting off the point of Centrus and we're going to get back to it very quickly. So if you can't handle a informing tangent, then I apologize. To be considered cheese, it only has to contain 51% of pressed curds of milk, i.e. cheese. Just like non-Russian oil can contain 49% Russian oil. You see where I'm going with this? Wasabi is often imitated European horseradish with colored dye, and marketers get away with it by calling it a sauce or infused paste. Yet again, Latvian oil or Latvian blend, right? So Latvian blend, Russian oil, European horseradish, wasabi paste. You see what's happening here? Which, by the way, the food market is another market. It doesn't have to just be a nuclear market or a commodity market or a fuel source market or a food market. It's all about false advertisement and manipulating people in some sort of a psyop fashion. Food can be called whole grain if the grains contained within it are 51% or more. And if a product contains 8 grams or more of whole grain per serving, it can be called whole grain, even if the product contains more refined grain than it does whole grain, because 8 grams of whole grain per serving, and yet again, you get to expand or contrast serving to whatever helps you. So maybe it takes 5 slices to make this happen. So 5 slices is now a serving, and now you get to call it whole grain. And then you have this fun little picture, and I've been tricked by this once and never again, of, you see this picture? Benevolent bacon. And then in smoky, saucy, savory. And then if you really zoom in, vegan. And they get away with that. Now, one of the counter-arguments for no need to worry about Russian uranium because Centrus has a long-term supply agreement with Orano. Has anyone asked the question of where does Orano source their uranium from? Their LEU? Because remember, uranium isn't LEU and LEU isn't HALEU. They're all different. So Orano gets their LEU in large part from Russia. So what happens when they default and have a force majeure? I mean, it's a good question, don't you think? And then another question I have is how much of the dealings that Centrus has with the Department of Energy and other regulatory bodies is merely a formality due to the pushback that would be derived from sourcing HALEU and or funding HALEU projects to foreign competitors and sources. GLE, Silex, Orano, Cameco, Urenco. Are you familiar with these names? If you're buying Centrus, you should at least know these names. So who can create sufficient quantities in the fastest amount of time at favorable economics? By the way, Urenco already has a New Mexico facility. Okay. So I bring up these names. Let's go back. Let's go through them. GLE, Silex, Orano, Cameco, Urenco. You go type into Google or one of your financial search engines, competition for Centrus. And this is the dog shit that they give you. Fission Uranium Corp, Deep Yellow Limited, Encore Energy, UR Energy, Hallador Energy. Then what we have, US Silica, Intrepid Potash. That might be one of my favorites. 5E Advanced Materials, Energy Fuels, Piedmont Lithium, Compass Mineral International, New Gold. And it all makes sense. Because this is the whole joke about the Tegas report and doing your due diligence. Like, oh, well, Sequoia Capital bought FTX, so they have a big team, so they must have done due diligence. So who am I to question their process? They vetted them. I'm going to invest in FTX. It's nonsensical garbage, and you're fooling yourself and setting yourself up for disaster and catastrophe. Just like if you go this, you type these in, you look at them superficially, because that's all this is. It's a level of analysis abstraction. These are all competitors insofar as you view them on the level of analysis of coal and consumable fuels. Or if you view them on the level of analysis of small cap basic material companies. That's the wrong level of analysis. And I've seen, the reason I'm making a deal about this is because I've seen multiple pieces now where they say Centrus doesn't have any competition. And then yet again, that brings up the question, what do you mean by competition? You have to question the concept in a sentence just as much as the sentence itself. If you Google who makes HALEU, Centrus pops up a whole bunch, which is interesting because that's an ethnocentric, national biased result. And if you were interested in investing in HALEU, and imagine Rosatom was still a publicly traded company that you could purchase, then you would be doing yourself a disservice. Just like Silex is see, because Cameco owns a part of GLE, and GLE owns a part of Silex, and Silex is Australian based, and you can actually buy them over the counter, and or if you have a brokerage account that purchases beyond America, you can get it. And this is all very much worth noting because so many articles I've seen say they don't have any competition. And that's just a stupid thing to say. It really is more of a reflection and profession of their ignorance than it is an admittance of an actual fact. Which is one thing that prompted this video. So, back to maybe why Centrus is a buy. As the adage goes, it's not just what you know, but who you know. Daniel Poneman, the CEO, has deep ties into the because he was the Deputy Secretary of Energy, also serving as the Chief Operating Officer of the U.S. Department of Energy. This man knows a lot of people. Here he is with a picture of Obama. And he knows a lot of people. And that really is quite helpful. This piece is from 2015, not long after the bankruptcy of Centrus, which, yet again, you think as an investor, you should at least know maybe, like, has my company gone bankrupt before, and is my CEO a felon, like Carvana? Like, maybe these are worthwhile things to know. If the revolving door goes nuclear. If the name Centrus doesn't ring a bell, that's because it was known as the United States Enrichment Corporation, USEC, until last March, which would have been March of 2014, when the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Before it went under, USEC had enjoyed decades of special treatment from the Department of Energy and other government offices. Like its predecessor, Centrus is likely to need a lifeline from U.S. taxpayers in order to stay afloat. With Poneman now on board, the company may be able to utilize his cachet to attract future government bailouts no matter the potential taxpayer. That's a bull case. One that I've not seen. And that I'm going to emphasize and re-emphasize. They're in bed with the government. Look, I mean, they're even bragging about it on their investor presentation. And when you're in bed with the government, that means you get a lot of cheap capital. And even if they underperform and fall short, and normally in a private sector, the contract would be canceled or not renewed or something, that isn't necessarily the case when it comes to the government. After all, the government is great at throwing good money after bad money. So here they are bragging about it. And another note I would like to make is that they're really pushing the narrative of major public-private investment and how it will take years to accomplish. Now, first of all, public-private investment is code for taxpayer subsidized. And taxpayer subsidized a lot of times is code for cheap capital, which is good because you want your WACC, your weighted average cost of capital, to be lower than higher. So the government loves to blow money, so why not? And then they temper your expectations with a long-term time horizon, which is good because these things do actually take time, over budget and over deadline. And I don't think, because a lot of times when I hear these long-term projections like Kathy Wood's, it's like, yeah, you give yourself enough margin of error to be able to screw up for more years to come and not have to be accountable or culpable for your underperformance by selling a pipe dream of a long enough time horizon. And that's what they do. Just like Carvana's projections or some of these other insolvent companies that are burning cash and are going to be bankrupt if not heavily infused with a massive down round in the next 6 months. Like, I don't care about 2025. Like, I'm concerned of them making it through 2023. But with Centrus, I give them a break because this stuff does take time. And when the U.S. is your counterparty, it minimizes risk of default and it increases the odds of further funding, because talk about gambler's fallacy and doubling down and sunken cost. You can think of a governing body as that which possesses all the inferior qualities of humankind and all of its biases and less than flattering predispositions. U.S. seeks $4.3 billion for uranium to wean off Russian supply. Like, that's probably more of a start than an end point. Just like the amount of money that Centrus is going to take to do what they're doing. Like, don't think that they're not going to request more money. And, to end things, 9 out of 10 reactors funded by DOE's Advanced Reactors Demonstration Program need HALEU. Okay. See, this is one of those tangentially associated things in which point A doesn't really act relevantly to point F. It's like, they need HALEU. We're working on a project that creates HALEU. If this project creates HALEU, that'll benefit us because we're making HALEU. Now you're conflating categories, because you making HALEU doesn't mean that you're profiting off of the sale and distribution of the HALEU. And just because these all need HALEU, including TerraPower Bill Gates operation, shout out, is that you might not be the only one come the time that HALEU's being produced. You might not be the only one producing HALEU, as Cameco, Urenco, Orano, Silex, Russia makes HALEU. So your HALEU, that you call your HALEU, that isn't your HALEU, doesn't necessarily even mean that that will be the HALEU that goes and fuels these projects, because these projects won't be fueled with HALEU for years to come. And that's a lot of time for these other projects and participants to gain traction, gain funding, issue bonds, so on and so forth, and be able to operate and surpass you. And by you, I mean Centrus. So another worthwhile thing to consider. And with that said, we've been at this long enough. Hope this was helpful. Thank you for watching, and until next time.